The backlash to The Acolyte is worse than anyone involved with it imagined it ever could be, to the point where a vocal minority can no longer be blamed. Clearly, it's being rejected by the majority, a majority that has been corrupted by Nerdrotic and the Critical Drinker. Hollywood has an emerging new narrative, but there's a big problem with it. So, let's see what this new narrative is and expose the problems with it. The audience response to The Acolyte has forced Hollywood to accept some very harsh realities, forcing a change in the narrative, which we all got to witness in real time. Of all the defenders of The Acolyte with a sizable social media platform of their own, Grace Randolph of Beyond the Trailer fame is by far the most prolific one. Her overwhelmingly positive reviews of The Acolyte, combined with episode interpretations so steeped in Disney Star Wars deep lore that many assumed could only have come from Lucasfilm directly, led to accusations of her shilling for Disney and even her own audience turning on her, big time.
Like, it's not fun to be in the middle of a hate storm, let me tell you. It really sucks.
Perhaps in response to the overwhelmingly negative reception to her positivity towards The Acolyte. She then proceeded to conduct a poll on X, essentially asking her audience if they had any excitement left for the future of Star Wars beyond The Acolyte at all, to which more than half of 17,000 respondents, predominantly from her own audience, responded, nope, they were done. And as pointed out by WDW Pro in our livestream of Friday, June 14th, that poll was designed with the intent that anything but that option come out on top, as it even had the option of filling in your own most anticipated project, like the Rey movie or whatever upcoming animation you may fancy. But only 9% of respondents took advantage of that option, further demonstrating that the fans, on the whole, are done, and are presumably only in it to behold the train wreck at this point. For someone that, overall, has been supportive of the direction Lucasfilm has taken under Kathleen Kennedy, these are very sobering numbers, as they support the ratings from Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic and other review aggregators, the very same ones the outlets defending The Acolyte accuse of having been subjected to review bombing by a small minority of toxic fans, in the process ruining The Acolyte for the supposed majority of Star Wars fans, in their minds the masses and masses of fans of Disney's Star Wars. This is not only the traditional narrative and the traditional playbook on how to dismiss critical voices. That was indeed also the main thesis of the pictured inverse piece I covered a couple of videos ago. But if anyone ever truly did, no one seriously believes that to be the case any longer. There is now an emerging acceptance in Hollywood and the surrounding punditry that it's not any vocal minority, but the overwhelming majority of the Star Wars fanbase that finds The Acolyte to be actively off-putting.
Disney isn't known for thrill rides, unless you count studio drama. What a roller coaster! With Star Wars fans, some Star Wars fans, although it does seem like almost all of them, tearing The Acolyte to shreds like it was Cinderella's dress for the ball.
Still, some do try to maintain the illusion that The Acolyte can't possibly be as widely rejected as literally every metric should tell you that it is. Case in point, this piece by Paul Tassi of Forbes, not to be mistaken with Eric Kane, also of Forbes, where Eric Kane astutely pointed out that all of his fellow establishment critics who praised The Acolyte are at best crazy. Paul Tassi will have you know that The Acolyte now scoring 15% on Rotten Tomatoes is embarrassing. Not for The Acolyte, mind you, but for you, the audience, because how dare you? First, trying to maintain the illusion that the Acolyte can't possibly be as rejected by fans as it appears to be. He doubles down on that there has to be some kind of review bombing going on here because no real evidence is produced to back up that claim, and the weak arguments that are presented were thoroughly debunked by our good friend Valiant Renegade, so I refer you to him for that. But accepting that probably the majority really do dislike the Acolyte, because that simply can no longer be denied, Tassi resorted to the new narrative, which is really the old narrative of dismissing critical voices as bigots, only now it's applied on the majority of fans, instead of a vocal minority. He wrote, "Why is this happening? There are a bunch of dimensions to this, and none of them good. There is absolutely a racial and gender component to this. A clip from star Amanda Stenberg about making white people cry was shared tens of thousands of times online, taken out of context from an interview years earlier about her film The Hate You Give. Something that incidentally we and our friends on YouTube have always emphasized. But moving on. And on that note, showrunner Leslie Headland has starred in many YouTube thumbnails lambasting the woke nature of the series, but also it allegedly breaking canon. Here I would have expected a collage of thumbnails, but only one is shown, namely the one from our previous video. A proud moment for both myself and for Dave, who actually made that thumbnail. That aside, Tassi then proceeds to make a few more factual errors in his breakdown of the show. Again, head on over to Valiant Renegade for details, before he rounds out with, "The 15% score is embarrassing. Not for the show, but for those review bombing it to a frankly laughable degree. I'm not even the Acolyte's biggest fan, as the first 2 episodes I didn't love, though I thought episode 3 was more interesting. But the worst Star Wars project by an order of magnitude in the history of the series? And it just so happens to be one mostly starring black women? This whole situation is a parody of the modern toxic fanbase of the series. And if you want to disguise it as being upset about canon, then it shows a distinct lack of understanding of both the material of the show and the wider universe. You can critique a show, sure, but overwhelmingly, that is just not what's happening here, and it goes well beyond that. While we have seen many things like this happen with Star Wars fandom over the years, I can't help but feel like it's absolutely getting worse. So yeah, the problem here is you, and things were bad when you were just a vocal minority. But now, you are seemingly the majority, and that is why things are getting worse. Although no names are mentioned, someone truly horrible in Tassi's book, as well as influential, must have spread a lot of hate for this to have happened, and that sentiment is echoed by Grace Randolph. To be clear, I like Grace Randolph. She is a consummate professional, and her reviews on cultural hot topics aside, her box office breakdowns are excellent and always honest, and she will, at times, such as in the aftermath of the Marvels, speak some very harsh actual truths to her audience. She is also very useful as a gauge for the Hollywood mindset and worldview. A mindset and worldview that, on some key issues, is detached from both the audience and the world at large. Point is, I don't mean to rag on her, nor should you, and I only cover her like I've done in this video and a handful of past videos, when her position on any given movie or series is so far removed from both the audience and what you might call common sense, that she actually becomes part of the story itself, and this is the foremost of those times.
So,
having accepted that many more than she thought actively dislikes the Acolyte, she tweeted, "I understand why some of you are frustrated with Star Wars right now, and I'm by no means trying to tell you your feelings are wrong. I do feel the loudest voices against the Acolyte are taking on hate speech qualities, and that does not help your cause." And there we have it. Hate speech, and you are not being helped by the loudest voices being declared guilty of that. Is she referring to anyone in particular? Don't know, but Looper just said pretty much the same thing, only they named our good friends Nerdrotic and the Critical Drinker as the culprits, in a video they released and quickly deleted, but not quickly enough.
Some audience members have issues with the show's diversity and LGBTQ+ themes, and those should be dismissed. However, viewers should genuinely examine the legitimate criticisms the Acolyte has received. Cultural critics like the Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic have dubbed the show lore-breaking for its recent revelations, but their commentary isn't productive. Rather, it encourages bigotry and hatred over a show that's just getting started. As always, rage bait and review bombings distract from actual criticism. In particular, Episode 3 has proven to be controversial, and perhaps rightfully so.
That might be worth paying attention to, but for now, let's return to Grace's tweet, for which she got some instant pushback. One paraphrasing her to highlight how what she said came off. I'm not saying your feelings are wrong, but most criticism, in my eyes, is hate, so just keep that in mind. Which is a very apt reading of her comment, even though she responded, "That's not what I said and you know it." But clearly, as many pointed out in the replies, it kind of was. The Hollywood and surrounding entertainment media complex point of view is that the Acolyte is so inclusive that it should be for everyone. Our ideology is very clear on that. So if you don't like it, it can only be because of hate, you bigot. Even though no actual hate or bigotry has been expressed by anyone, because in actual reality, the problem is that Kathleen Kennedy is an incompetent ideologue who only commissions garbage for that very reason. And while Leslie Headland may be a skilled storyteller in her own right, her sensibilities are simply not a fit with Star Wars. That doesn't compute though, as two women having mucked this up would go against the ideology that is so prevalent in Hollywood. Therefore, the negative response to the Acolyte must by default be based in hate, presumably over all the diversity on display. But there is a big problem with that narrative, and credit where credit is due, Grace does see it.
I don't understand. Maybe you guys can tell me why, for those of you who are on the other side of that stuff, okay? Why didn't Fallout get criticized? Was it because of the Westworld background? Fallout has a female lead and an African-American lead, or a black lead. I don't understand why people were okay with this, Walton Goggins does take up a lot of energy in the room. That's true, Chris Kahn. There was not a lot of LGBT content here. And then also, I do wonder if the strong 1950s aspect had a part in it. Very strong 1950s, society in there. And so that may be part of why the show was not targeted. So I guess maybe that protected it. But it's a very diverse show.
Okay, Grace, allow me, as an outlander, to explain to any out-of-touch elite bubble dwellers who may be wondering why the same audience who rejected the diverse Acolyte, and the diverse Rings of Power for that matter, made the diverse Fallout the biggest and most universally embraced and beloved hit Amazon ever had. And no, it wasn't Walton Goggins alone. Replace him with another actor of his caliber as the Ghoul, then all else being equal, Fallout would still be a great show. But if you were to stick him into the Acolyte, then again, all else being equal, the Acolyte would still be every bit as mocked and rejected and ridiculed as it is right now. Not even Walton Goggins could save it. Case in point, Ahsoka. The late great Ray Stevenson being in it only meant he was the best part of an otherwise awful show, because the show was no less awful. So it goes beyond any one actor, and also it goes beyond Fallout setting, though the setting is a very big part of it. Fallout takes place in an alternate future LA, which has the same demography of the real LA, which means the diversity on display is completely natural and not forced in any way. If nukes were to drop on the real LA, then the genetic makeup of the survivors would be very much like we see in the show, meaning it's authentic, and audiences all over the world will accept it as such, no questions asked. That's why it's embraced worldwide. Not because anyone sees themselves represented on screen, but because it's authentic. Fallout is diversity done right. But whenever out-of-touch Hollywood producers feel the need to signal their virtue, they force diversity in ways that are not authentic, but that breaks the illusion and loses the audience. Case in point, Bad Robot's Lindsay Weber, executive producer of the mega flop, Amazon's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. In adapting, or rather rewriting Tolkien for a modern audience, she spoke down to that audience via Vanity Fair, saying, "It felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what the world actually looks like." By which she meant, reflect what LA looks like, because to bubble dwellers like her, that is the world. But as someone that has actually traveled the world, and not just the high society of it, the world doesn't look like LA. And what is more, no one in the world wants to be pandered to that way, especially if they're fans of Tolkien, because immersion was just broken. As Grace has observed herself, audiences don't care about seeing themselves on screen if they're pandered to in ways that are obviously inauthentic.
And for instance, Latino audiences have long fueled the horror genre, but every time Hollywood tries to make a horror movie with a Latino lead to appeal to that audience even more, or as a thank you, the Latino audience doesn't like it. So can Hollywood crack the code of what Latino audiences are looking for? Because right now, they remain a wild card. Do you have any insight on it? What would you say?
So there's that. But then there is the messaging, and this is where the diversity in Star Wars and the diversity in something like Fallout differs the most. Warning, I'm about to partially spoil Fallout, so if you haven't seen it, scroll forward now till the spoiler banner is no longer on screen. In Fallout, you have good and bad people from all walks of life, including good people that do bad things because they're in a messed up world and have no other choice. But the truly evil are the ultra-powerful ones, the corporate aristocracy of that world that would quite literally burn the planet to the ground and everyone on it, only to enhance their own power. The scene where Walton Goggins' character overhears that aristocracy's plans for the future is truly chilling. And it rings all too true with the leaked videos from the WEF of our world, where our aristocracy discussed the future of humanity.
This, perhaps, is going to be the biggest question in 21st century economics and politics. What to do with billions of useless humans?
Also, like in our reality, the aristocracy in Fallout is a pretty diverse bunch, and the most evil of them all is Walton Goggins' character's own wife, a black woman. This is entirely authentic and believable, because people relate to one another based on their socio-economic background, and she obviously is at a level where the attitude she holds for the useless people is commonplace. In short, the diversity in Fallout was authentic, natural, believable, and if anything, it enhanced the show. There may have been DEI requirements behind it, but if there were, the showrunners were able to make it work to the series' favor. By contrast, the diversity in the Rings of Power only serves to break immersion. But the worst of all is Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars, where the diversity only serves to underline the intersectional ideology that so many in Hollywood adheres to, even though it is positively anti-science, as well as anti-history. Case in point, the lesbian space witches are persecuted, because Leslie Headland must have missed out on Pride Month the last 20 years. The lead, a black woman, tells the one token white man that he has victimized her, and he should go perform self-deletion for it, which he does, as he cannot live with his shame and regret. The only other white man we've seen so far was a criminal, and black men, you don't get off the hook either, as the strong, diverse lead woman was raised by other women who didn't need no man, and you are represented by this very safe Don Lemon insert, who is only there to be wrong and make the women look even more stunning, brave and capable by comparison. Need I go on? In essence, this is why the audience rejects the Acolyte. Not because of the diversity and representation in and of itself, but because of how it is used to further neo-Marxist messaging at the expense of storytelling and entertainment value. You wouldn't think this would be so hard to understand. The people behind Fallout certainly got it. Let's hope the rest of Hollywood and the surrounding media complex will get out of their bubble and get with the rest of the world one of these days. Till then though, they'll continue to comfort themselves by projecting upon now the majority of the audience what they themselves are, and they might very well continue to blame major YouTubers for it. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.